A term is, or sorry, a ratio is something like in a recipe 2 eggs for cornmeal, or last week we talked about maybe in something we were making in an industrial plant, 15 pounds of steel for every 18 pounds of copper, and you would write that out like this. There are basically three different ways that we're going to learn how to do it: 2 to 4, 2 over 4, or 2 to 4. And a term, all that is basically any number in the ratio. So these are the two terms. 2 and 4 are the terms here. And basically show 3 ways to write the following ratio. There are 4 blue marbles to every 3 yellow. You could say 4 to 3, or you could say 4 to 3. Number 3, Jacob built 30 toy airplanes in 5 hours. What was his unit rate for the building of airplanes? Basically what I'm saying was, how many did he build in a certain amount of time? And all you got to do is say 30 divided by 5 for the number of hours here, and then the number of planes, and that's 6. So basically what you would be, kind of like miles per hour. In this case, it's 6 planes per hour. If he was able to build 6 planes a minute, or 6 planes a second, or something ridiculous like that, that would be the answer. But here we just divide and say 6 planes per hour. Now Jennifer works for a florist, and in 15 hours she made this much money. At that rate, how much will she earn if she works for 10 hours? Basically, we need to find out her hourly rate, and that's something you'd be very interested in. You'd want to know how much you were making an hour. Well, in this case, we're going to have to figure it out ourselves. I'm basically going to divide 112.50 by 15. Bear with me 1 second. I gotta go kill my dog. Sorry about that. Now all we got to do is divide. All we would simply have to do is divide. We would do, first thing we'd want to do is bring our decimal up. Answer is going to be 7.50, but that's not the answer. The answer is $7.50. Well, that's what our hourly rate is. Now we have to figure out how much money would I earn if I work for 10 hours. So we simply multiply that by 10. And we would get $75. Now, each lap around a path is 1/3 of a mile, and it takes Andy 1/9 of an hour to do that. What is Andy's unit rate? In other words, miles per hour around the park. The little trick I taught you is, if you're confused with something, fill in some numbers that are more, that make more sense, and at that point, figure out what operation to perform. So let's say 1 lap around the path was, I don't know, 4 miles, and it takes Andy 2 hours to walk 1 lap. So basically you're going 4 miles in 2 hours. 4 miles in 2 hours. How would you figure out your miles per hour there? Where you would simply say 4 divided by 2 equals 2. Well, I divided here. I divided this by this. We can apply that same logic to here, even though it looks kind of weird. We've got a 1/3 divided by 1/9. Okay, and all we would simply do is say 1/3 divided by 1/9. Well, we got to keep change and flip that, so we got 1/3 times 9 over 1. This would be 9 over 3. This would be 3 miles per hour. Holly's room is 12 feet by 9 feet wide. The carpet she wants to put in the room costs $4.50 a square foot. How much will it cost Molly to carpet her room? Well, all we need to do, first we need to find out how many square feet her room is. And what we do is multiply the 12 by the 9 to figure out how many square feet we are. So basically you had a room that was such like this. You have 12 and got 9. To figure out the square footage or how many total feet blocks basically, or feet squares you have, you would multiply 9 times 12. I should have done that the other way. This is 8. Carry my 1. And this ends up being 108. I should have done this like this. But anyway, I got 108 square feet. Well, that's not the end of it. It's $4.50 per square foot. $4.50 each. So I have to multiply these two. So I got 108 by 450. And remember, decimals are important here. Well, my answer is not 48,600. Remember, I've got two places past the decimal here, so I have to move this over twice for a total of 486. Well, that's not my answer. My answer is $486. If 5 tomatoes cost $2, what is the unit price of the tomatoes? Unit price, we're trying to figure out how much each one is. So if I've got, if 10 tomatoes is, $2, we would divide and get 5. Well, we're not dealing with that. We're saying 5 tomatoes is $2. So we're going to say 5 divided by 2. We're going to put 5 or 2 in the house. I'm sorry, forgive me. It's going to be 2 divided by 5. And in which case 2 is going to go in the house and 5 is going to go outside. You're like, well, Mr. Kemp, that's not going to work. Well, yeah, well, we have to add some decimals here. Bring that guy on up. 2 or 5 will not go into 2, but it will go into 24 times. It will go evenly. 0.40. What does that mean? It's 40 cents. They're 40 cents a pop. Now, it says on number 8, using the information from the last question, how much will a dozen cost? Well, if we know that we're going to buy 12 and they're 40 cents a piece, we simply multiply that out like so. We get 0, 0, 0, 8, 4. We add up, that's be 480, but they're not $480, of course. We got 2 places past the decimal here, so we got to move this over 1, 2 for a total of $4.80. You could also set that one up like a proportion with fractions and label it and so on. Now, the cost of a tent rental is $160 for 5 days. At this rate, how much does it cost to rent it for 1 day? Well, all we need to do is find the unit rate. And then we can find out for any given different number of days. We can find out for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, so on and so forth. Well, first we got to find the daily rate or the unit rate. Okay. So in order to do that, we would say 160 divided by 5. This will go in here 3 times. We get 15. With a remainder of 1, bring down my 0, 2. And this won't go anymore. And our decimal is right here. I should have brought that up to begin with. But anyway, our answer is 32, but it's not just 32, it's $32 a day. So now, and that was luckily where I only asked about 1, but if I wanted to say 20 days, you would simply multiply 20 by the 32 and get your answer. There are 3 counselors for every 45 students enrolled in school. What is the maximum number of students allowed if there are 10 counselors? Well, you can basically figure out how many. You can do this one of 2 different ways. You can say, well, I can divide 45 by 3 and get 15. And what that means is for every 1 counselor, there are 15 students, and I could say, well, I need to know 10. I can multiply this by 10 and get 150. Or I can set up a proportion. I could say 3 over 45. But what am I going to do with my proportions always? I'm going to label them. So we're going to say counselors here and students here. Well, now I don't know what goes where. I'm looking for counselors, so I need to put that there and then the X here. Now all we simply do is cross multiply. We multiply these two together and get 450. Well, if that's the case, then these two multiplied together must also be 450. So that comes out to the equation 3x equals 450. We're going to get the x by itself, so we got to divide both sides by 3. This cancels out. This equals, just take my word for it, it's 150. And you can do that long ways when you set up this goes in the house and this is on the outside. So the answer is the maximum number of kids allowed if there are 10 counselors will be 150. They would not be allowed to have more than that if that was the rule. Okay. A recipe for rice pudding calls for 2.5 cups of milk for making 5 servings. So let's just say 2 1/2 over 5. This is servings. This is milk. I want to know how much for 8 servings. Well, servings goes on bottom. The unknown goes on top. We would cross multiply here now. And this will give us some practice multiplying our fractions. Or mixed numbers at least. I got 2 1/2 times 8. Well, why don't we change this to an improper fraction? Let's say this converts into 5 over 2 times 8 over 1. Which is 40 over 2, which is 20. Well, if that's the case, then this times this must also equal 20. So we'll have 5x equals 20. We'll divide both sides by 5, and we'll get 4. So 4 will go here. Now, some of these, there's a little bit of a shortcut you can do. Isn't 2 1/2 half of this? Well, it stands to reason that this would be half of this, and that's what we have. Some of those, you can't always do that shortcut, but sometimes you can. But if you're going to do those shortcuts, you got to be careful. Make sure you're right. Camille bought 3 pounds of nuts for $10.35. What is the unit price per pound? Okay, all we do there is divide $10.35 by 3 to figure out how much they are per pound. This will go 3 times 9, 1, bring down my 3. This will go, oh, I need to bring my decimal up there. I got to be careful with that. This will go in here 4 times without going over. We'll bring down the 12, remainder of 1, bring down this 5. This will go in here evenly 5 times. We're at $3.85 per pound. Now, Mrs. Carson drove 96 miles in an hour and a half. What was her speed in miles per hour? We've gone over this several times, but we would put 96 in the house and 1.5 on the outside. But I'm going to have to move this and move my decimal here so it becomes 15 into 960. This will go in here 6 times. This will be 90. With a remainder of 6, bring down my 0, 4, and this will go evenly at 64 miles per hour. So as you simply divide that by that. This is another one of those more difficult ones, but you can certainly do it. It takes Edward 1/20th of an hour to run a quarter mile. What is Edward's unit rate in miles per hour when he runs? Well, let's swap this out for some numbers that make sense. Let's say Edward, it takes Edward, I don't know, 2 hours to run 8 miles. Okay, I don't know how fast he's running. 2 hours and 8 miles. We want to figure out what operation to perform. And the way this one's worded, you got to be careful. You can say, well, it's 2 divided by 8, boom, done. No. He runs 8 hours in, he runs 8 miles in 2 hours. So in this case, we would divide 8 by 2 and get 4. We're going to be dividing here. Well, we simply do the same thing here. We're going to divide this by this. So we're going to say 1 over 4 divided by 1 over 20. Well, we got to keep, change, and flip, and multiply straight across. This is going to be 20 over 4. This is going to be 5, because this is 20 divided by 4. 5 miles per hour. Whitney earns $206.25 for 25 hours of work. How much does Whitney earn per hour? Well, to find out how much she earns per hour, you're simply going to divide 206.25 by 25. So what we're saying is, every 25 hours she earns this much. I want to figure out how much she earns per hour. You simply divide the amount of money she made by the hours.